Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Passive Tree Podcast, a podcast dedicated to talking about life, Path of Exile 2, and everything in between. I'm your host, Blazeworks TV, and today we are joined by none other than Roast Pork Belly. Welcome on, and how the heck are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely,
Um,
man.
I,
Absolutely.
I've got a 4-day weekend. In the UK, we have these bank holidays. So this is day 3.
Day 3 of the 4-day weekend. We love that. So, how have you been spending your long weekend so far?
Just playing Path of Exile.
That is an ideal long weekend. I would have it any other way, honestly. Has it been mainly Path of Exile 1 or Path of Exile 2 as well?
No, just one.
Okay, so you've basically made the switch over because of like the new I saw they're doing like a new like private league or something like that. What's going on there?
There's a whole load of different options. And I've just gone for a basic one because all of the other ones have like big challenges.
Okay.
So
So seems like yeah, there's some stuff going on there. I wanted to essentially jump in with a question that I like to ask my guests, just to get to know you a little bit better. It's a classic question for the Passive Tree podcast. I think a lot of guests will come to love this question. So describe to me your sort of first intro or foray into gaming when you were a kid. The best first memory you can tell me about.
well, for me, it would have been during the 80s, going to arcades. So we didn't have consoles back then, apart from, say, Pong on the TV or back on the CRT days. But yeah, essentially going to arcades with friends or record shops, cafes. Um, Back in the days of Space Invaders. So that's where I would have started. And there'd
And
be one person playing
mm,
and a big crowd of people behind you watching.
that's amazing. Okay, so arcades was like the first introductory to gaming. How old would you say you were when you like first stepped into an arcade?
Maybe 14, something like that.
Hmm. And was Space Invaders like the game that you would like go there for, or were there like a bunch of different games that like you really loved to play back then?
There were lots of them. There was, yeah, Space Invaders. There was Gorf, Phoenix, Galaxian, and sometimes you'd see someone who was just really, really good at the game, and they could do something called clocking it, which means they'd get the highest score, and then they couldn't get any more points. So the clock would go back to 0. And people would nudge each other and say, "You know him, he can clock it."
Oh my God, I've never heard of that before. That is pretty damn cool. And I feel like back then, like you're not obviously looking at like you're not watching anyone play anything online. You're seeing it, all that stuff happen in real life in real time, and you're like actually able to appreciate their skill and see it live, which is like super cool as well. Did you ever clock a game? Any clock?
Well,
Right on. So basically, started off with arcades. When was the first time you got a console or made the transition from arcade into sort of like PC or console gaming?
for me, it was console, but it came a lot later. So if you consider I started in the 80s gaming, and then there was a gap when I went to university. I was still going to arcades, but then it would have been late 90s when my dad sent me his old computer. It had a 2 gig hard drive, and I played Quake 2 on the PC.
Okay, so
And
Quake 2.
yeah,
So when your dad sent you this computer, was it just like a present? Did you ask for it? Like, how did that sort of come to be there?
there's a story behind that.
Hmm.
My mother thought he was having an affair because she came into the room and he quickly minimized a window and she just assumed the worst. So, what he did to kind of say, look, I'm not doing anything, he packed up the computer in some boxes and told me, here, have a computer. And that's how I got it.
That's amazing. Okay, so to prove his innocence or lack of guilt,
Yeah.
he said, "I'm just gonna get rid of this whole thing, send it over to roast pork belly." Okay, so you benefited heavily from that. Was he gaming on that computer before you got it, or were you like the first person to put like games on that computer?
No, he wasn't a gamer and
Hmm.
he didn't really understand gaming.
Okay. Okay. So Quake 2, obviously a very iconic first-person shooter title. Were there any other titles in the 90s? The 90s was an incredible time for video games. Were there
Mhm.
any other titles that really sort of captured your attention or like really left an impression on you in the 90s?
There were lots of games around like Duke Nukem that other people told me that they were playing, but I didn't play that many myself. There were things like Age of Empires and Myst, and online was just about starting. But for me, it was just Solitaire and Minesweeper, that sort of thing.
Okay. So very sort of rudimentary gaming games, like the pre-installed games for the most part. So tell me, when did you play your first action RPG game, and which game was it?
It was Torchlight 2, maybe 3 years ago. I know like Diablo's been out for ages and there are others, but they were not on my radar at all.
Okay. So what sort of led you to try like Torchlight 2 amongst it being, out after Diablo or all these other ARPGs? Like what stood out about Torchlight 2 that made you want to try it?
It was a friend and fellow streamer called Just Squiggy who said, "Oh, you got to try this." And it was very cheap to buy. It's like £2 or something. A very small download. And he said, "Give it a try."
So
And
what did you think after you played it? Were you like this is sick or what this is not cool?
it was a genre that I'd never really tried before and had never really considered. Um, it was interesting. It wasn't like I hated it or loved it, but yeah, I kind of went with it.
Somewhere in the middle, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Torchlight actually, I played Torchlight 2 as well. It was actually pretty good for like as you said, a smaller, sort of cheaper, I hope that doesn't get taken offensive by whoever hears this, but type of ARPG. But it has all like the fundamentals and it actually is pretty fun. Um, so after playing Torchlight 2, how did you sort of make the transition into getting into like Path of Exile?
Well, it's the same streamer, Squiggy, who was playing it, and he said, "Oh, you got to try it. This is the best ARPG. So if you like Torchlight and you want to take it to the next level, you got to check this out."
Okay. So this guy is just single-handedly corrupting you. He's getting you into ARPGs, and now fast forward 4 years later, and basically you all you like. It looks like you've been playing just a lot of like Path of Exile 2.
Well, Path of Exile, I only started playing last summer, and already I'm over 1,000 hours in, and roughly 500 hours into Path of Exile 2.
Okay, so with that amount of hours, it's funny. Anytime someone talks about hours in terms of video games, there's hours in a video game, and then there's hours in Path of Exile game. So like, if I had spent 500 hours playing like Cyberpunk, people would be like, "Holy crap, you like probably 100% beat that game." But if I
Mm.
tell someone that I played 500 hours of Path of Exile, they're like, "Oh, good, you're like starting to understand the game a little bit." You know what I mean? Like people talk about Path of Exile hours in terms of thousands, not like hundreds of hours, which is I think it speaks to the game's complexity and also just the amount of like replayability that it has. So what about Path of Exile 2 has or Path of Exile in general has really like captured you and allowed you to spend, as you just mentioned, 1,500 hours of your time in the last like year or so?
There's a kind of satisfaction to like killing big groups of monsters, which I haven't found in any other game. It's usually like either small groups or individuals, but this like big sort of AoE and the colors and the sounds. I don't know, big dopamine hit each time I get a sort of hit, uh, hit dopamine and hit the monster.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like, for myself, I haven't really delved into Path of Exile 1. Always thought it was a little bit like overcomplicated for me whenever I tried to get into it. And Path of Exile 2 sort of just like really roped me in with its like accessibility and sort of the new player experience being a little bit stronger. But you're absolutely right. Like, with an action ARPG, if the sound design's done right, if the skills feel good, killing all those monsters, which is essentially the point of the game, and having the loot drop and the sound of the items drop, it all just sort of connects and like tickles the right synapses in your brain. So, yeah, I can definitely see that. Was there anything else that like really captured you in terms of Path of Exile? Like, was it, maybe the character building or the end game systems? Like, what were your, sort of favorite parts about that?
In general, in most games, I don't like story or dialogue, and if I can, I will skip it. And when people are in my streams and say I'm playing Assassin's Creed, which can be a bit story heavy, and they'll ask, "Oh, what do you think of the story?" And I'll say, "Well, I tend to just ignore the story or just blank it out and focus on the gameplay." So in an ARPG like Path of Exile, there is a story, but it's very much in the background. So for me, I can just focus entirely on the gameplay.
Okay, I see. It's funny because some people like myself really do enjoy ARP storylines, and I think that goes back to Diablo 2 because that game, I don't know if you've played it before, but it really did have a pretty captivating story. And I think that's good for the first playthrough. But after the first playthrough, which is kind of how you go about these ARPGs, it's nice that you can just skip everything and then just play the game without having to sort of focus in on that story all the time. There is sort of a difference between Diablo and Path of Exile that I sort of wanted to bring up, where in the newest game, Diablo 4, what they've done is they've essentially made it so that once you've beaten the campaign once and you make a new character, you can opt to just skip the campaign entirely and just go straight to basically like the end game, essentially, or just the open world. And Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 are more akin to like Diablo 2, where if you make a new character, you have to progress through the story each time. Um, would you prefer if, Path of Exile or Path of Exile 2 gave you the option just to like skip the campaign and just get right into your hideout and maps? How would you feel about that?
For me, no. I really do like the campaign in both. So I'd miss it.
I mean, the campaign in two, I don't know anything about the campaign in one, but the campaign in two is probably the best ARPG campaign I've ever played. I mean, I've done it 30, 40 times now on different characters, practicing for speed running and all that kind of stuff. And you think you'd get bored of it, but every time you go through it, all the beats are there, all the experiences and the zones are just so different, and it just feels like a great time every time. It's amazing, man. So, what
Yeah, I
are
would.
your? Oh, sorry to interrupt you there. I was just going to say, what are your favorite things about Path of Exile 2? Because you sort of listed the dopamine hit as sort of your favorite thing about ARPGs and stuff like that. But Path of Exile 2 sort of took those things and sort of elevated it. So I'm curious to hear what your opinion is about the second game.
Certainly coming from Path of Exile 1, I'm going to come from that perspective. And the first thing I saw was the improved graphics and the boss fights. Obviously, in Path of Exile 1, you've also got the boss fights, but the kind of grindy, almost Souls like feeling in Path of Exile 2 to just keep trying if you are failing against the bosses. I really enjoyed that.
Yes, and that sense of accomplishment that you get when you finally beat like, one of those bosses you're stuck with, like it just feels so good. I remember when I first started playing the game, I was an absolute Path of Exile noob, and I think I spent like probably 2 hours fighting Geonor, getting him down to that last like quarter of his health and just dying and having to reset. But when I beat him, holy, it felt amazing. So okay, Path of Exile 2 has sort of upgraded on a lot of different things, especially the visuals, the music, the animations. I feel like the fluidity of the characters is just a little bit nicer than Path of Exile 1. Was there anything that you found after your experiences in Path of Exile 1 and 2 that Path of Exile 2 has done worse?
Well, coming from Path of Exile 1, the f- the major thing that's missing for me is the crafting. You can do so much with crafting in Path of Exile 1 with the crafting bench, the haughty crafting bench, the beast crafting. There's none of that. There are also something called vendor recipes, and that doesn't exist in Path of Exile 2.
Hmm. Yes, the age-old slot machine gaming in Path of Exile 2. Do you think that over time, GGG is going to get the deterministic crafting level of Path of Exile 1 in Path of Exile 2? Or do you think that that's just the vision for the game and that they want to sort of steer it in a different direction?
I think they would have had something similar to start with, certainly the bench. And when I saw I've forgotten the name of the bench, where you get
The salvage bench?
the salvage bench, I thought it would do more
Hmm.
than what it does. So I was kind of disappointed when I saw that.
Hmm.
But because that's all is there, and the recombining and the new the ritual, is it
Omens.
ritual, where they combine, that's kind of it in terms of crafting.
Yeah, it seems like from what I understand, the objective of everything that they're kind of doing in Path of Exile 2 is to preserve the need to pick up stuff off the ground. From what I understand, it gets to a point in Path of Exile 1 where there's very few situations where ground loot matters the further you get into the game. And I think that like Jonathan specifically has talked about how they want to preserve the fact that you need to pick up items in Path of Exile 2. And I think that
Ah,
sort of reinforces their latest decision with all of the loot buffs that they just basically dropped a couple days ago, when now you're getting even more stuff on the ground, more tier 2 and tier 3 and tier 4 magic items and rare items and stuff like that. So I don't know if they're ever going to hit that same level of determinism that they have in Path of Exile 1. I'm not sure.
yeah, there's something called It's gone again. Omens,
Hmm.
which you can use to be a bit more deterministic. But then to get those to drop is quite difficult, I've heard. I haven't used those so far. The people who are crafting in Path of Exile 2 tend to be using like hundreds and hundreds of chaos orbs.
Yeah, it seems like it's only available, like that level of crafting is only available to like the 0.1% of players. And then there's people like me who are like just exalt slamming something, it misses, and then you just like either recombinate it or disenchant it or what or reforge it essentially. So I feel like it's interesting because I don't hate it. I think that what they've done in Dawn of the Hunt, where they've introduced the fracturing orb, which allows you to sort of lock in one of those modifiers from clearing a cleansed area, in conjunction with, you know, the recombination, so combining two items to get those really a base with two really good modifiers, is a step in the right direction. But there is still just a lot of like you just miss on everything, and it feels kind of bad. Like, if you find a really good, I don't know how much you've had a chance to play around with the recombinator, but prior
Yeah.
to the new update that they just did, it felt really hard to even do it because you had to get expedition currency to make the recombinator work. So you'd have to farm expedition. It was about like 20 to 30 expedition artifacts per recombination. Then if it misses, you don't you both the items also get destroyed. So it's like I just lost 30 expedition currency and I just lost two great base items as well. So I feel like there's definitely some more work to be done on that. What's your opinion on trading? I feel like you know, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you've basically been playing only Trade League, softcore Trade League, correct?
No, right at the beginning, I played trade at the beginning of my Path of Exile career. So last summer, I guess.
Mm.
And because I was streaming it, people came in and gave me gifts, and it was fun to get to end game quickly
Hmm.
and be really powerful, but it sort of spoiled the learning experience.
Mm.
So since then, I've been pretty much exclusively SSF.
Oh, okay. My apologies. So you went from Trade League, but you got too many gifts, and it spoiled the difficulty curve. And then you moved to SSF. What were some notable sort of, or how did SSF feel to you when you kind of went through the game a second time and played SSF?
I was looking at every item that either I dropped or got as a quest reward and examining all the modifiers. And there's a website called Craft of Exile and also PoEDB, and looking at, well, how does this modifier interact with this skill? How would it help me? And then basic things like getting your resistances, getting life, um, and also attributes so that certain of your skills are going to work as you level the skill gems. But I wouldn't have thought about any of that if people had just given it to me, or if I just go on the trade website and say, okay, I need that. I've got the currency, I'm going to buy it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like for me, I had a very similar experience, not with people giving me gifts, but I started off in Trade League, and then I sort of got fed up with the sort of the way that trade works in Path of Exile 2. I feel like, I don't know if you ever played any old like RPGs or MMOs before, but it's like it kind of felt akin to something just really outdated in terms of like the way that trade is compared to how elevated everything else is in Path of Exile 2. Like it just feels like such a nice modern ARPG with a lot of great like features and it feels great. But then you get to the trading part of it and it's just like a website that's down half the time, takes forever to find items, and then when you do have to trade with somebody, there's that weird sort of friction because it's between two people, and so one person has to join your party and stuff like that. So um, I found for myself that SSF is like the best way to play because you don't have to worry about any of that. and it also makes it so that all this stuff you're finding just feels so much more exciting. Like that dopamine that you're talking about, actually, there's more of it because, these items that you get are like, all self-found, right? So, would you consider ever going back to trade now, or are you going to specifically stay in SSF moving forward?
Well, in this private league, in the little group that we have, we've kind of traded, well, not really trading, we're just donating items to each other that we found. If we could have more of a barter type of thing like that, I would go for it. But otherwise, the excitement of dropping or finding items yourself, I find a lot more rewarding.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like once you get into like the SSF lifestyle for ARPGs, it's hard to like go back to just like finding items and be like, oh, like how much can I trade for this? Instead of like being like, yo, this is a big upgrade, or I can craft on this, or there's a lot of it makes you have to make these like meaningful decisions with your items and currency that I feel like kind of gets lost within like the trade league. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and it slows down the game as well.
It does. I mean, we tend to play a lot of ARPG. Like we put a lot of hours in ARPGs. I know myself. I get super into them, blast, play a ton to get addicted. And I think SSF it absolutely does slow down that progression as well to the point where I guess you get like more extended time because you have to, play a lot more to find all those items and stuff like that. So I wanted to
Yeah.
talk to you about last Epoch a little bit. I saw that you were playing that. I think you mentioned to me that your community ended up buying it for you. Tell me about your experiences with last Epoch and how it compares maybe to Path of Exile.
Well, I played very little of it. I'd say less than 20 hours. Uh, what people told me was that you didn't need to have a build guide. You didn't need to really understand the synergies or think about min-maxing early on. And so I just jumped in, created a character, and started playing. But it didn't hold my interest in the same way. And while I was playing it, I was thinking about Path of Exile. So I put it down and went back to Path of Exile.
Okay, that's pretty funny. While you were seeing that other girl, you were thinking about the main your wifey, right? So, it's
Yeah.
hard to do that sometimes. Can you describe to me a little bit more what wasn't keeping your attention? Was it the just general moment to moment gameplay? Was it the way that skills worked? What about the game just sort of wasn't hitting the right, spot for you there?
I think what I remember from first playing Path of Exile is that when I got a weapon upgrade or added a point on my passive tree, I could feel the damage spike or becoming tankier. It was tangible, it was noticeable. I didn't quite see that or feel that in last Epoch.
Hmm. Okay. So as you sort of played through and progressed through, you felt like your character wasn't sort of noticeably getting stronger.
Not quite sort of point by point.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I've been supporting Last Epoch for quite a few years, even before the multiplayer was out. So it was just like a single player ARPG. I'm a big fan of ARPGs, as you probably can tell by now. And anytime that there's a new game that's coming out, especially with a success story as fun as Last Epoch, where there were just a bunch of Redditors that banded together and made this game from Kickstarter. Um, but yeah, I totally get what you mean. I feel like for me, whenever I play it, and I haven't played it in a while, but I felt like the characters just didn't have like the same weight as they do in Path of Exile 2. You know what I mean? Like Path of Exile 2, the characters have this sort of like groundedness to them, and all of their abilities and animations kind of have this like oomph, this like punch to it. You know what I mean? And then with Last Epoch, it felt a little bit like floaty to me. Like the characters just sort of were like floating around. They were very like lightweight. I don't know. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, it didn't feel as 3D. It was more 2D.
Hmm.
Whereas in Path of Exile, if you go back, well, not even go back, those fighting games like Tekken or Street Fighter, where you have to like learn the moves and dodge, uh, Path of Exile feels a bit more like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, like more akin to, fighting games or something where like your actions weren't like instant, but they were like meaningful whenever you did them. So, okay. So, you're not going to go back to Last Epoch anytime soon. It sounds like you were playing that game. You were thinking about Path of Exile 2 the whole time. And that's not what you want to feel when you play a game, right? When you're playing something and you're like, "Oh, but this I could just be playing Path of Exile. It's so much more fun." I love that. So talk to me a bit about your experiences with Dawn of the Hunt, a big patch that came out probably about like a month ago or so. How did you feel about the patch? Did you try any of the new ascendancies? Give me the scoop.
Okay, I didn't start straight away because I was still playing Path of Exile 1, Legacy of Frisia. Um, and I didn't play Huntress straight away. I know a lot of people jumped into Huntress because that's the new character. And I just pulled up build guide because I first thing I heard was that it's a lot harder, everything's got nerfed. What am I going to do? But I still wanted to play. So I just started doing a ranger. And I remember how strong a ranger was from the last patch. And it just felt disappointing.
Mm,
I had like lightning arrow and orb of storms, lightning rod, and you can just blast through Act One really fast. But this was just not really doing much damage. And I looked at this build guide, which said, oh, at some point you change to gas arrow, and this will be fine. Um, but the character was squishy, and I wasn't doing damage. And after a while, I just thought, nah, I'm not going to play this anymore.
mm. But then I think I saw you go rake stomping ground after that. So you took a break, I guess reconfigured a little bit. And was it with the same character, or did you end up making a new character to try that out?
Well, before I got to Rake, I got into speed running Act One using a warrior.
Hmm.
So I made like a long list of, right, now do this, now do that. And I was just going through Act One over and over again with warrior. So leap, not, yeah, leap slam. Well, that was later,
Yeah,
but
shield
rope,
charge.
sorry.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then I was watching a guy who was giving the layout, and then he did sub 30 minutes of Act One, but using Rake,
Hmm. I saw
and I
that
just wanted to
video.
try it.
Absolutely insane. I mean, once Rake came out, it just completely changed the like Act One. I don't know if he continued and did like the full game, like Act. I guess I call it like an Act Three speed run, but that run was insane. The damage. I haven't tried it yet. How was your experience with that? I guess comparatively speaking to the Lightning Arrow Ranger that you played.
Uh, Night and day.
Hmm.
I mean, the damage from level 6 when you can have the skill gem to cut the rake, and then rake, stomping ground, and you just stack strength, and you've got a movement skill on top of that, which is the same skill.
Hmm.
You can just speed through. You can also use disengage to make it even faster. But I used it with warrior to start with
Oh,
because the
okay.
warrior has strength,
Hmm.
so you've already got a head start.
There you
Uh,
go. Okay, yeah, I've heard it's insanely strong. It I think what people are describing it as to me is how good Lightning Arrow was to level up through the campaign last patch. That's what like Rake and Stomping Ground is this patch. So did you end up progressing all the way through into maps with that character? How far have you gotten into Dawn of the Hunt?
with that warrior, I finished Act One, and then I thought, well, I'll just keep repeating and copy what I'd seen to try and get my times better.
Hmm.
Because I was still like 2 hours. I was nowhere near half an hour. But I did an experiment to see, well, will it scale? Could I just use Stomping Ground and Rake and then add other things like bleed damage and just take it through? And yeah, I finished the whole of the campaign just with that, with the warrior.
Okay,
But,
nice. So that's basically as far as you progressed through Dawn of the Hunt was you found the Rake and Stomping Ground was like your the build that you enjoyed the most, and then you basically got to was it to maps or did you just beat the Act 3 campaign?
I did get to, yeah, I did get to maps with warrior.
Okay, so
I
did
was
you?
surprised.
Oh, nice. I mean, if you can get to maps using essentially the same skill gem setup, minus or plus a few different alterations as you level up, I mean, that's a really strong like leveling build. Did you have any sort of hands-on time with the newer and updated end game? The corrupted areas have been changed since last patch. Did you ever get to try any of that sort of stuff?
No, I did like very, very early maps, like tier one, and that was it.
Hmm. Okay. So you beat the campaign and you're like, all right, I'm good. Time to go play some Path of Exile 1, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's cool. I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about speed running. I didn't know that you ended up getting into this. I actually never did any speed running ever in my whole life until Path of Exile 2 had those races a few months ago, and I ended up doing pretty well. I was playing in my the monk, which was not nearly as strong as the warrior was, but I ended up getting my Act 3 time down to about 3.5 hours, which put me in the top 70 in the race. And I'm not gonna lie, dude, it was the most stressful gaming experience I've ever had, where you're just like racing against the clock, every second matters. And I don't think I would ever do it again. And it made me just really respect these guys who speedrun every game. It's crazy. Tell me a little bit more about how you felt when you were sort of learning how to do that.
Well, like you, I've never done speedrunning before, and I've never even considered it as something I'd like to do. Uh, and I did it for maybe 2 weeks. And like you, while I was doing it, and I had live split going, you're kind of fumbling. It's like a boss fight, but during the whole of the speed run. Because you're looking at everything like, should I go that way? Should I just stop now? So for me, they were practices.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it made me respect people who speedrun so much more. I already knew it was a incredible way to sort of like play video games, essentially just trying to do them as fast as possible. But Path of Exile 2 specifically to speedrun that game, it requires so much knowledge of different things. Like there are different like things you can skip in the campaign that I didn't know about that I think just made me a better player, and it probably made you a better player too, especially through Act 1. Like you can skip when you get into the Grim Tangle and and Una starts singing that song that makes the roots go down. You can skip that with the reset checkpoint. You can skip running through the gates of the cemetery with Lachlan. You can skip that with the reset checkpoint, and he'll just spawn right there. There was a lot of really cool like stuff that I just learned that I would have never got to experience through speedrunning. So that was cool, but way too stressful for me, man. I felt like so angry when I would like mess up a zone or die or something like that. So are you gonna continue practicing that, or you sort of had your foray into that and you're all done?
I might come back to it,
Mhm.
but at the moment, for The rest of this month, anyway, I'm just going to be in this private league, and maybe do some other characters.
Okay, cool. So I have no idea what's happening in Path of Exile 1 right now. Tell me what's going on with these private leagues. Have they added new gameplay stuff? What's the scoop?
Um, I'll need to reference so I can tell you all the different options there
Hmm.
are.
Okay.
So the private league is running for the whole of May, and they're free as well.
Hmm.
Normally they cost money, but due to this special event, they're running them for a month for free, and up to 20,000 people can join your league.
Oh, wow. And this is just a league that you make yourself, essentially, or like you can make with friends and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So you
super cool.
create the league,
Yeah.
and then people join your league.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I really hope that they put that in Path of Exile too as well, because I'm assuming that when you make this league, you can sort of customize it with certain things that you can do or not do,
Yeah.
like challenges and stuff like that as well. Okay. So tell me about the league that you joined.
So the one I created is one of the free ones. So you've got a list of maybe a dozen different options. So I just did Settlers, which is the current league,
Mhm.
and also Necropolis, which was a previous one. But I didn't add any of the challenges like Gauntlet or like Atlas bosses showing up in the campaign or anything like that, which you can do.
Oh, okay. So it's essentially just like a fresh start in the two, I guess, most current leagues, and then your community can sort of opt in to join these leagues, and then you all can sort of play together or see each other's progress happen. That's so cool. I hope that they implement that into Path of Exile too as well. That sounds rad, man.
Yeah, that would be good.
Absolutely. There's a lot of stuff like that. As we mentioned before, that they have the fundamentals in Path of Exile 2, but there's a lot of these extra things like that can definitely be brought over from Path of Exile 1 into Path of Exile 2. Is there anything else that you'd like to see that you've really enjoyed in like PoE 1 that could be like, this would be great in like PoE 2 aside from like the crafting stuff?
There's a streaming overlay in Path of Exile 1, which allows you to see uh, the streamers, the gear and
Okay.
their inventory. You can just like slide it across and you can see exactly their build at any time without them having to open it.
Oh,
That would be
wow.
nice.
That's really cool. Oh my God. So if you're watching, like, if I'm watching you on Twitch and you have that overlay, I can like click and see like your inventory and all that kind of stuff, like without you even opening it. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's super cool.
And you can hover over all of the gems. You can, as though you're in game.
That's very sick. Okay. Yeah, we need that too. That's gonna be awesome. All right. Well, let's move on to something that I like to ask my guests as well. So Grinding Gear Games, the company that makes our beloved Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2. Um, I have just sort of slowly started learning about them over the past, I want to say like 4 months or so. I didn't know anything about them previously until I started playing their games. But since playing their games, I've sort of delved into who's making them, who's behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff. And it really, made me love the games more because I really love the developers. I love their transparency. I love how much they're so community feedback driven and stuff like that. I would love to ask you the same sort of question. How do you feel about grinding gear games after playing Path of Exile and the newer game for about 1,500 hours? Yeah, what's your thoughts on them?
Yeah, like you said, they are willing to kind of listen to the player feedback and also to respond that quickly. Like they'll come onto the podcasts and hosted by sort of the more popular streamers, and they're answering each of the questions, and they're not reacting to the feedback and saying, "Oh my God, no, this is not our vision." And, within a few days, they've taken on board changes that the viewers and players might want and then implemented them. Next patch, here they are.
It's
So
amazing.
I like them.
Yeah, I no, I totally agree. I've never seen a developer so like in touch with their community and so I guess committed to making sure that like the dialogue between their community and their the development team is strong and is always heard. A little bit about myself. I come from a long era of Blizzard games, starting off from like StarCraft, Diablo, and all that kind of stuff. And so that kind of set my baseline for what my expectations were with video game developers. And I feel like, over the years, this is a whole other topic of conversation, but Blizzard has sort of, fallen from grace, declined as their games sort of have. And the stuff that Grinding Gear Games would do, like, these content patches every 3 months would be like what expansion packs that were like paid expansion packs would be for Blizzard. You know what I mean? So it's completely flipped it on my head where I'm like, wow, like this, even Dawn of the Hunt, I feel like would have been like, a paid expansion for like Diablo 4 essentially. So I feel like I'm getting spoiled by grinding gear games in terms of like how awesome they are. You know what I mean? Do you think that as Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 become even more popular, they will continue to maintain this really connected sort of attitude to their player base, or do you think it's possible that they may go down that sort of more corporate, suits mentality that Blizzard and a lot of other developers have experienced over after their continued success?
Well, if they keep the same people, the same personnel, uh, I would say people don't change that much. And they seem committed to keeping it in dialogue with the community. So I reckon that will stay the same for the foreseeable future anyway.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think that as long as the people behind the scenes, like, so it was Chris Wilson and Jonathan Rogers who were like the main, I guess, guys for Path of Exile 1. Then Chris Wilson, I think, left this Grinding Gear Games within the last year or so, and so now it's Mark Roberts and Jonathan Rogers. So I think that as long as those core sort of people that sort of started with the company continue to work within the company, that I don't think it'll change. But it could be bad news if we all of a sudden see like Jonathan Rogers stepping down or something like that, and the games could just
Mm.
completely change, right? So we'll have to wait and see. But I really love the company, and I hope that as they continue to find their success within the gaming sphere, they don't pivot and sort of go down the same sort of corporate greed mentality that a lot of these game developers have, because they truly do love their game, right? They play it, they love it, and it's just refreshing to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. All right, so Path of Exile 1, new league. What's your build? What are you going for in that? And how far? What are your goals with the league?
Well, I got a favorite build in Path of Exile 1, which is called Righteous Fire.
Hmm.
And I wanted to do that again, but use a different ascendancy.
Okay.
So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
So which ascendancy did you use for that, and which is the new one that you're using?
In the past, when I built it before, sometime last year, I used Chieftain, which is an ascendancy of the Marauder class. But this time I've gone for a Templar, and the ascendancy is Inquisitor.
And what was the reason behind changing that?
I wanted to try something different. I am following a build guide by someone who has created a wiki essentially on this character and on
Hmm.
this build. There's so much information, and someone like me who's still feels very new to Path of Exile can look at the FAQ, can look at the path of building, and just make all those little tweaks. And
Mm.
also, it's very SSF friendly.
Okay, so not as gear aligned. I know that the Smith of Katava ascendancy, the new ascendancy for warrior, is sort of inspired by the chieftain ascendancy, from what I understand. And then the Templar, I don't know anything about that, and I don't know anything about those ascendancies. Can you describe to me like sort of what that looks like in terms of how it works for your build?
I've never played Templar before,
Mm.
so this was also like another reason for me to use this class. The cla the sorry, the ascendancy that I've chosen, Inquisitor, or not that I've chosen, that's part of the build.
Yeah.
It creates this consecrated ground, and then righteous fire works better on there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know Consecrated Ground. I use that all the time in hardcore solo self-found and Path of Exile 2. Ground that just increases your life regen. Very, very nice. All right. So, and do you have any sort of, when you play a league like this, or any time you play a new league or anything like that, do you go into it with sort of like a goal in mind? Like, I want to get to this particular level of maps. I want to get to this particular boss. I want, I hear the word mage blood a lot in Path of Exile 1. I don't know what those are, but tell me what your goal is usually when you go into stuff like this.
Um, for me, I haven't really been that far into the game. I've been into sort of red maps, but any further than that, like the end game bosses, I haven't actually been to.
Hmm.
So for this particular character, I would quite like to do that. But I tend to get caught up in the the mechanics. So there's something called delve. So each of the leagues introduces a mechanic to the game, and then you can get kind of lost in just doing that. So just farming, say heist. So delve was one of the leagues, and the last time I played a lot of Path of Exile 1, I just got into doing a lot of delve. So I just forget about mapping or looking for certain bosses and just going deeper and deeper into delve, which I'll probably do again.
You got to cut yourself off from Delve at a certain point. You're like, all right, I'm here. I see that Delve is calling my name, but we got bosses to kill. Okay.
Mm.
How does the end game sort of feel in Path of Exile 1 in contrast to Path of Exile 2? Since there's so much more to do, does it feel better, or do you like the way that Path of Exile 2's mapping is? Tell me how you feel about that.
Mm. Yeah, when I first saw it and I saw this huge kind of, I guess, infinite kind of area that you could use, I didn't quite understand it
Hmm.
because I was coming from Path of Exile 1, where you have a, it wasn't a waystone like they are in Path of Exile 2. You had a map token, and the map, meaning the area, was within that token and also had the certain tier on it. So they were kind of combined together. But you had these six chances, which they've now put back. But initially, in the last patch, you had one chance. And if you died, then you'd lose the chance to continue, and you lost the waystone as well.
Oh, I'm so happy that that's changed now.
Yeah.
How bad was that before when you just like spent all your like juicing up this mat or waystone and then you just die to something dumb and then you're like, "Oh my God, I lost XP. I lost my map with like, as Elon Musk said, four things on it. Like now I have to go back and get something else." Oh, that was a really weird game decision. I don't know why they made it so difficult, but thankfully it's not like that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So Delve is your favorite sort of end game mechanic in Path of Exile 1. Is there anything else that sort of compares to that for you in the end game of Path of Exile 1? Or is like Delve like the thing that you love the most?
There are other mechanics that I haven't done. I was getting into heist when I was doing the Freesia, and that's like going into a different area. And heist, as the name suggests, is to create a little group of people, and you go on a like robbing a bank kind of thing, a heist. And you have to unlock these characters which have special abilities that then can join you for the heist. So you can have one or two, and then you can get some really good items in there. So I
Hmm.
might do a little bit more of that in this league.
Very cool. Very cool. And so you talked a little bit about sort of the way that you play Path of Exile 2 and Path of Exile as well, where you're definitely more on the side of like I want to just go on Mobalytics or whatever and find yourself a really powerful build. Did you ever sort of find yourself confident enough or knowledgeable enough to feel like you could make your own build from scratch, or do you always prefer to sort of go with the pre-made build that somebody else has sort of figured out everything for?
My very first experience of Path of Exile 1 and 2, I went in blind because I wanted to have this first time experience of not using a build guide
Mhm.
and just discover the game. Um, and I got all the way through the campaign in Path of Exile 1. I made a video about it saying why you should go in blind. It took me 115 hours to
Oh my
complete the
lord.
campaign. Took my time,
Yeah.
learned about crafting. In Path of Exile 2, I got as far as Jamunra,
Hmm.
and that was it. I was stuck.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
that's when I turned towards a guide.
Okay. So the first time you played both games, you said, I'm just going to go in blind, experience everything, and see how I do. And in Path of Exile 1, you're actually able to beat everything after 100 and whatever hours. And in Path of Exile 2, you actually just got hard stuck on Jamun Ra. What was
Mhm.
your build that you were doing on Path of Exile 2 that you were sort of like what character were you playing? How are you building it? What was that?
I was using a mercenary
Hmm.
and just using different things like grenades and different shards. I think it was galvanic shards, explosive shards, and just it just felt like this works. This is fine,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
then it wasn't.
That it was. I feel like Jamon Raw, I feel like Act 2 in general is really where things just sort of ramp up a little bit. You know what I mean? And I feel like Jamon Raw specifically, a lot of people can get stuck there because you really have to make these sort of build defining decisions like which ascendancy you're going to in Act 2 as well. And yeah, that's totally fair, man. And then after that point, you're like, okay, no more self builds, build build guide time essentially. So was there any like build that stood out to you as being like your absolute favorite build so far in Path of Exile 2 that you've played?
I enjoyed the monk a lot. Uh, just being able to move, from group to group, and also the when you chain together the Herald of Ice and the Herald of Thunder
Mm-hmm.
together, and you get these big AoE clears. It was so satisfying.
Yes, I loved that. They took that out of the game, but the fact that we got to experience that in point one, where you were getting those double heralds and it was chaining off each other, and you just did one ice strike and then the whole like breach just exploded. That was like pure dopamine for sure. It was so good.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. No, the ice strike monk was really. I'm assuming you went ice strike, or which was what was your main attack?
Yeah, Ice Strike.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice, nice. Well, if you haven't heard already, there's another really powerful build in Path of Exile 2 that 53% of all players are playing right now, and that is Lightning Spear. Have you seen that build? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I haven't tried it past the campaign. I'm playing only hardcore solo self-found this league. I think that's just where I find the most enjoyment from is that sort of level of challenge and having to, build defenses as well as offenses as well. But I really want to try it because it just looks insane. It looks to that level of like throw a spear and then just everything explodes basically. So I'm excited to try that out. Yeah, all right, man. Well, I wanted to ask you, how are you feeling? We're about an hour and 5 minutes into the stream. I told you about an hour and a half. Just wanted to kind of check in with you and see how you're doing.
I'm good. Yeah, it's been interesting to kind of go into it, hear your thoughts as well on the game.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm having a great time. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for taking the time out of your day. Come chat about games. Something that, I really love to do. And it's just been great to be able to have like new guests on talk about this game that we all love. So we'll go for a little bit longer, maybe like another 15 minutes or so. And I just had a couple more questions for you. I had some general stuff that I wanted to talk to you about that I usually do at the beginning. So actually, I'm going to follow up with that and kind of do it towards the end of the podcast. So, one question that I did want to talk to you about, and what I love talking to different content creators about, is sort of your origins in making gaming content. So you're a streamer primarily. So tell me sort of about your like introductory to that, and like maybe what game got you into being like, I could probably like stream this, or I could probably like start making YouTube videos about this.
Well, I came into it without really a plan. So I was doing video diaries and I was looking for some software that I could use to make that content. So making content for myself really. And I came across OBS. I didn't know how to use it. So I looked for tutorials and they all talked about streaming. And I thought, well, what is streaming? So I looked that up and I saw there was somebody playing a game and they've got their face cam feed somewhere. And I thought, oh, I could do that.
When was this? Do you remember like what year this
This
was?
this was like June 2020.
Okay. So 5 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so describe to me what these video diaries were about. Like, was it about gaming stuff specifically when you were doing that, or how did that all start?
That was like a kind of personal journal.
Hmm.
So I've been keeping a kind of stream of consciousness journal since 2001, like every day, and I still do it. And I wanted to have like a video version of that. And it was during the lockdown, so it gave me a way of like unloading what I was going through. And the quality that I got from the built-in camera on the laptop kind of made me think, oh, I need to upgrade this. It was okay, but my plan was just to be able to talk to myself on camera and then hear it back and just understand myself a bit better.
Okay, that's super cool. So it's kind of like your version of journaling, but instead of writing stuff down in a journal, you were just talking to the camera and the mic and just sort of unloading your general thoughts and your feelings and stuff like that. And you've been doing that since 2001, you said?
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what sort of like benefits do you think that like gives to you? And would you recommend like other people get into that if they're feeling a certain way?
Yeah, the main thing is seeing patterns. So if you just do it for a few weeks, it's not really going to give you that feedback. But as you keep doing it week after week, year after year, you start to see certain patterns, um, certain turns of phrase that you have. Uh, Sometimes you get little sort of coherent patches which are kind of quite insightful and feed back to you something about yourself. And they're kind of very RNG based. So you might be writing a sentence and then write that same sentence over and over again, like, I don't know if I feel like doing this today. Should I even bother? And then there's like a little sequence of sentences that are like, oh, this kind of helps me see things in a different light that I hadn't even thought of before.
Interesting. So you sort of, review these things, or as you're doing them, you notice like, oh, like I've been talking about the same thing quite frequently lately, and it sort of helps you get a better understanding of like your own sort of like I guess mental health, but also like just kind of general perspective on like where you're at, essentially emotionally, mentally, and all that kind of stuff. Do you ever go back and watch like roast pork belly 2001 like video diary type stuff?
Every now and then, yeah.
Because that's a
And
significant time that's gone by, right? Like that's all like, it must be crazy to be able to have that sort of um you know those videos and be like, I want to check in with myself and see where I was at, like, how I've improved and grown as a person since then. I think it would be pretty interesting.
mm, and YouTube, no, the video diary only started in 2020,
Okay.
but the handwritten journals, they go back to 2001.
Okay.
But I don't keep them. At the end of the week, they go into the shredder.
What? Why? I'm so surprised by that.
The reason being is that it allows me to be a bit more open. So there's certain topics or subjects that I might hold back on. But if I know that what I'm writing down is going to go into the shredder, then I'm a bit more courageous about what I'm going to write down. No one's going to read this. It can't get into the wrong hands. It's like Friday morning, it's going in the shredder.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, with sort of the, end result being this is just going to get destroyed anyway, it sort of frees you from that sort of feeling that you have to censor yourself because it's just going to get destroyed. I get it. That makes sense. And that if that works for you, man, that's super cool. I'm a huge hoarder. I'm an artist. That's my like day job, and so I've kept every like sketchbook I've had since like I was a little kid and like all that stuff. So I love looking back at all of those things and saying, "Oh wow, like look how shit I was like 10 years ago or 20 years ago and stuff like that. Look how far I've come." And so I was looking at it in terms of that way, but I think for your own way of looking at it, I think you can kind of see how that improves over time without the need to having to look back at all of these things and see, where you were at and stuff like that, which is cool. Um, so I love this topic that we're at, where we're kind of talking about sort of like, different ways to sort of, how would you describe it? Preserve and improve your own like well-being. I guess it's like wellness stuff. Um, can you tell me a little bit more about any other practices that you have in terms of like your wellness practice? What are you working on in that regard?
Well, since 2019, I changed from being a night owl to being a morning person. And the reason for that is to have what I call my morning block. And that now consists of doing this morning pages, this journaling, and I start my day with that. And then I meditate. Then I read and I read aloud, mainly to practice. I also read for audiobooks. And then after that, I'll do my training, which might be cardio or weightlifting. So that morning block will be something like 3.5, 4 hours, but every morning.
Oh wow, that's amazing. And you've been doing this since 2019. So that's right before COVID. Was this especially helpful during that like tough time in our lives where everyone was sort of going through this crazy thing together?
I guess so, because I was already a year in, and this routine, morning routine way of living was already established.
Interesting. So you were ahead of the game where everyone was sort of like, I need to develop this routine to help me cure my depression because I've been stuck inside for too long. You were already like, you made some adjustments prior to it, so it was very helpful, I'm sure, during those like tougher times. Was there any sort of, if you care to share this, inspiration behind making that decision, where you said yourself you were a night owl? Were you sort of feeling down about yourself living in sort of this like opposite time frame, or was your sort of mental health at like kind of a low point at that point? Describe to me sort of why you made the decision to adopt this morning routine, become more of a morning person, etc.
Well, all of the things I did or do now, I was doing them, but my success rate was very sort of 50-50. So if I left my workout for later in the day, I couldn't guarantee that it's going to happen. Or if I'm reading a book, I couldn't guarantee that I'm going to spend like an hour every day. I may or I may not.
Hmm.
So I wanted to find a way to get closer to 100% success rate. And I was reading a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And he goes more extreme from like the 80. I don't know if you come across the 80-20 principle,
Hmm.
but it's like that, but it's more like 90-10. So you just cut out everything that you do and really focus just on one thing and put everything into that. But he
Okay.
talks about this front loading the day. So I experimented with it.
Interesting. And so after adopting that, what were sort of the noticeable changes from like were you able to have more of a higher success rate from this newer sort of daytime front loading strategy or
Yeah, it became apparent very quickly that I could get close to 100% success rate. Um, yeah,
that's amazing, man. Would you be able to sort of give any sort of you know, any advice or stuff like that to the listeners at home in terms of like wellness stuff and that maybe some people are sort of looking for inspiration to start their journey or are already on their journey? What sort of advice would you sort of give to somebody who's out there listening right now to this conversation thinking, man, I'd love to start doing something like that?
I'd say think about the cycles or patterns that make up life. So, number one is the 24-hour cycle. So, the sun comes up, sun goes down, and you are sleeping for a certain number of hours, and then you've got work. So, there is an existing structure. So, you can kind of find hooks to hang activities on. And I'd say the very, very first thing you should work on is to get a steady sleep routine. Right. I go to bed at this time, I get up at this time, and it's not later at the weekend. The weekend is the same. If you
Mm.
get up at 6 during the week, then get up at 6 at the weekend as well. And also have an alarm to tell you to go to bed. So,
Okay. And so that sleep schedule essentially creates those hooks that you can sort of start building upon because you have that schedule locked in place essentially.
yeah.
Very cool. I'm inspired right now because I'm going through a little bit of a transitionary phase in my life as well. I've had a very long winter. I live in Canada, in Toronto, and winter this year has been probably the worst winter in about like 5 months or so, or 5 years, I should say, rather. We just got so much snow. It's still freezing cold sometimes during the day, and that weather and that sort of that coldness and the desire to not be outside can definitely take a toll on my own like mental health as well. So I feel like now that it's becoming spring and stuff like that, spring cleaning, you want to like start fresh, start improving and stuff like that, not be inside as much. And so I think I'm going to take a step and try to really lock down that sleep schedule, really create those hooks for myself, because I think that you're absolutely right. That can definitely be super helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a really good foundation or starting point.
Absolutely. And then from there, sort of adopt the meditation, the exercise in whatever degree and stuff like that as well. You seem like someone who's very like very very strict with their like time management. Is that something you sort of agree with?
Yeah, it might come across as strict, as in kind of, self-flagellation. But what happened was I just experimented with it. And then the experiment just turned into a kind of habit.
Okay. All right, we have a chatter here, and I don't normally do this, but we're sort of towards the end of the chat. And Matty Boy 6900 says, "Ask Roast what he's having for dinner," and I think this is interesting for me as well because, as you've mentioned, you're sort of you know, focused on the sort of schedule that works for you and helps you with your life and creates these hooks and stuff like that. When it comes down to eating, are you like a healthy eater? Are you someone who eats the same thing all the time? So let's follow up with Maddie Boy's question. What are you having for dinner? And describe to me sort of like the nutrition that you're eating like on a regular basis.
Okay, for dinner, it's my one meal of the day because I do one meal a day intermittent fasting. And I've been doing that since 2014. And from 2018, I've been pure carnivore. So the meal that I have is exactly the same thing that I have every day, which is beef and eggs.
Hmm. So just super high
Um,
protein, no carbs. How many
yeah,
calories is that one particular meal?
um, like 1800-ish.
Okay. And that's literally the only thing you eat every single day, essentially?
Yeah.
Wow. And there's no divergence from that for like holidays or if it's your birthday, you want to go out for a steak or something like that. You ever feel the need to do that?
I used to, and there's a really good organic, locally grown butcher nearby. But after I did that a couple of times, I didn't feel the need anymore.
Interesting. Um, I don't know if I could ever do that because I'm just such a food and flavor enjoyer, but if that if that makes you feel really good just having the same meal every day, you don't have to worry about it. Like do you just feel like nutrition and food is sort of a thing that you just have to just get out of the way? It's just fuel for your body and you're not eating for like pleasure essentially. Is that sort of the thought process behind that?
I used to be very much a foodie. I used to have dinner parties at home back when I was married. I'd go to people's houses and cook dinner parties for them. So I was very kind of more of a flavor and reading recipe books and creating meals. But again, this was just an experiment, and I didn't know if it would stick. And the craving is gone.
Mm,
That's how it works.
right. That is so fascinating. And so that has been your essentially your meal for, I guess you said the last, like since 2014, you said? Carnivore
Uh,
and
Carnivore since 2018.
2018. Okay. Okay. All right. Big question here. If you were to break the roast pork belly diet right now, and you just like we're gonna go out and get a crazy meal or something like that, or better yet, yeah, like what would it be? Maybe it's like you know how they say like your last meal, like if someone's gonna get like this is kind of grim, but if you're gonna get like the electric chair or something like that, they bring you your last meal. What would that be? Would that still be the beef and eggs, or would you just like like let's go all out here?
I think I'd have one of those Turkish barbecue type things with lots of different meats,
Mm.
different marinades,
Ooh.
like shish kebabs, but like lamb and chicken and maybe like meatball type things. So it'd still be meat.
Yeah, but there's just different flavors on there, different. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds really good. Okay, I got you, got you. Very cool. All right. Well, we're at about an hour and 25 minutes, so I think we'll probably wrap things up here. Just wanted to say again, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on and chatting about all things Path of Exile and moving into the wellness stuff as well, which has been super insightful and I found super interesting. At this time, I'd like to basically give you the floor to say whatever you'd like to say. You can sort of shout yourself out, tell us where we can find you, and what you're sort of doing and working on at this time.
Well, just thanks again for having me. Um, I'm on Twitch mainly. I do have a little bit of YouTube content, but it's mainly old VODs and some video essays. What I'm working on is just being relaxed and enjoying my life, really, and playing a lot of Path of Exile.
It seems like you've kind of figured out a way to, you know, build your life in a way where you're, focus on your health of your body, your mind, and also keeping it, I guess, like as stress free as possible, and having a lot of time to play, games which you clearly enjoy quite a lot. Which is, it sounds like the ideal lifestyle, which is, I admire that
Thank you. Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure, for
feels
sure.
good.
All right, guys. I know a lot of the people in the chat are already part of Roast Pork Belly's community. I will leave a link to his Twitch. What would you say your streaming schedule is, just for the viewers at home?
It's sort of 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. most weekdays, and at the weekend, I'll do two streams, one during the day, one in the evening.
Okay, so you're streaming quite a bit on Twitch, usually 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. after, in the evening. So if you folks are interested, check out Roast Pork Belly on Twitch. He's been playing the new kind of private league on Path of Exile. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you folks in the next one. Peace. All right, everybody, that wraps it up for this episode of the Passive Tree Podcast. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe for more PoE2 content. I have a bunch more episodes of the podcast lined up with some really great guests, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And until next time, happy blasting, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.